Welcome to SMB Podcast, where we provide our reviews on the economy, capital markets, geopolitics, and emerging technologies. I'm your host, Sam Bale, the founder of Future Capital Partners, or FCP, with my good friend and your co-host, John Sinclair. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Sam. Hello, everyone. I'm John Sinclair. I specialize in corporate strategy and transformation, especially around growth and turnaround. And I've developed many highly complex transformation programs globally for some of the Fortune 500 companies as well as late-stage startups. And hopefully we'll be able to share some of those success and setbacks with you. Hi, Sam.
John, a lot of people have been talking about the great resignations or the opportunity in disguise, and I want to get your views on that on the topic. So let's start with what is driving the phenomenon.
Yeah. So I think it's a multiple thing. One of the most obvious that everybody talks about, that what's driving the great resignation, is COVID related, right? So you've got lax work permit situation, whether it's the United States or European Union, right? Or people can get easily local work permit. They're no longer tied to their employers. They could work for any companies, right? So that's one of the definite change. The second piece is be able to work remote. So once you have the opportunity to work remote, you could work for any organization, any employer, and you're no longer constrained by geographic location, right? And that created a huge shift in balance, right? So in the last several decades, employers had the complete control, right? Complete control of the situation where they dictated the term of employment. Now, the power of balance is more with the employees. Now, they recognize they can work for any employer. They're no longer limited by geographic locations. So I think that is the most obvious, right, that everybody talks about, that it's contributing to this great resignation, right?
So, COVID is, I think, made it just realize or see this phenomena. What would be the least obvious?
Good point. I think you and I have been talking about this for a while, right? So because what you're seeing really, what COVID has done, it has exposed the problem that have been brewing for several decades, right? It created a tremendous opportunity for the workforce at large. I can go back, as far as I could think back, post 9/11 is where you saw a tremendous push for outsourcing. One of the biggest challenge that it introduced, or should I say inadvertently, it introduced this risk. I don't think it was well thought out. Initially, the understanding that the outsourcing was to leverage, to augment your workforce or complement your workforce. And over the months and years, very quickly, it became replacement of your workforce to the most part, right? So naturally, it created a significant amount of anxiety among European and U.S. workers, right? And I could tell you that from my own experience and working with so many of my colleagues, I remember in the post 9/11, I kid you not, you could literally leave a job and walk into the next job next day. It was that easy to find work, especially if you're in a high tech and technology, and financial services industry. Post 9/11, it became next to impossible, right? Because the competitive landscape completely changed. The employer's recruitment appetite completely changed, right? So they were no longer recruiting top talents from local market. Rather, they were highly relying on outsourcing vendors. And the organization recognized the cost savings opportunity from labor arbitrage, right? And it was vastly leveraged, perhaps over leveraged, without the thought or the long-term thinking what impact it will have in a longer term on the U.S. and European labor force, right? So what happens when something like this happens, right? So as human being, we like certainty. Change is not something that everybody accepts unless you are clear of the outcome, what that change introduced. So the era of outsourcing post 9/11, it created a significant vibration. People lost their sense of trust. all of a sudden a vulnerability was introduced that your job is no longer secure. What used to be career move, like if you remember, I remember when I started in the late 90s, right? People used to work in a corporation 15, 20, 25 years until they retire. That was the most common thing. It was a career. It was not a job. People didn't job hopping, right? But what this has done, this post 9/11 era, that sense of being part of an organization as being a valued employee, a valued member of a company, you just became a disposable widget, right? You're no longer a strategic asset. That shift created significant emotional distress and distrust. So when you're in that situation, you no longer have a functioning organization where people working as a team. It almost inadvertently creates a Hunger Game type mentality because it's a supply and demand, right? If there is so few good jobs available, the ones that are there, you want to hold on to it. And basically, it's like either you protect your own job or compromise your livelihood, right? So I saw the shift from a culture of a fun place to work. I mean, I work for I've been very fortunate. I work for some of the largest, most amazing companies in the world, right? I work for Deutsche Bank, Barclays Capital, IBM, Accenture. I could tell you that I loved working there. I remember those days, how much fun it was going to work, how much fun it was to get together with your coworkers, right? That sense of camaraderie, right, that was there. It was natural because we didn't see each other as a competitor. We didn't see each other as a threat. So when you know that you're subject to these arbitrary and perpetual headcount reduction exercise, one of the things that has happened post 9/11 era of corporate culture, it's like every 3 to 6 months there is a new reorg. I'm not sure who's advising these companies, right? I understand the reason why they do it because they're trying to take out some cost, especially if you're a publicly traded company. But the reality of the matter is, just if you do an analysis, a deeper analysis of these organizations that has embraced the culture of perpetual restructuring and headcount reduction, and just look at their financial statement and ask yourself, did they actually grow? Did they grow revenue? Did their organization become more successful? The answer will surprise you. The answer is no. Answer is absolutely not. I could tell you the companies in Wall Street, when I was working there, some of these companies were top 2, top 3 most profitable investment banks in the world. 1999, 2000, Barclays and Deutsche Bank, these were the titans, right? These were the most profitable, most prestigious bank in the world. Especially if you worked in Wall Street, it meant something. And I remember Deutsche Bank at that time, I believe, was 160,000 employee, one of the second or third most profitable bank in the world. And then the same thing was with Barclays. Fast forward today, Deutsche Bank is a shell of its former self. It's not even 40,000 employee. And if you look at the working culture in there, it's like all you see is people are simply holding on to their job. And the only reason people even have a job in Europe because of the protection from a workers' council. Barclays Capital, I mean, I don't know how it is in UK, but I remember in New York, in Wall Street, when I was working, it was in 222 Broadway. Now it's in Midtown. It was an amazing place to work. It is not the same. I have friends still work there. It is not the same working culture. So now think about that. Fast forward next 20 years, which brings us to the modern day. You've got an outsourcing culture that was supposed to be a temporary staff augmentation, complement your existing workforce to become the replacement of your entire workforce in many cases, right? It created a significant amount of vibration to your employees. They feel unsafe. They no longer look at your organization as a career. It's just a job. So what COVID has done, it gave them an opportunity, gave them finally first time in their life where they can go work remote and work for any employer. And in some cases, and you also heard this new phenomenon where people talk about side hustle. The side hustle is not just a saying. Trust me. I mean, I have seen it. I know of people have two, three jobs while they're working remote. So their income potential has gone up. I'm not suggesting that everybody's doing it. This is not something, I support, or I don't think anybody should be doing that. I think this is wrong, right? It's morally wrong, but it's happening, right? Because people have an opportunity to make extra cash, and many are taking advantage of that, right? So I think we talked about that, and then another piece that I see is another bigger problem. It's the organizational design.
I was going to ask you that because you laid out the problem at a macro level really well. And, we want to distinguish these problems from a structural standpoint at a macro and a micro. So, what are the issues within the legacy organizations, right? If you can categorize those.
Yeah. So in the last 2-3 decades, a lot of companies have transformed significantly in many aspects of their business, from digitization, from the technology standpoint, from legacy, on-prem into cloud, advancement of data analytics. A lot has happened on the IT side and the business side. But the two key or critical organization that I could think of that has remained unchanged to most organizations, I'm not going to say all, but to quite a few organizations out there, and that I could think of is HR and procurement. HR still operates in a legacy mode, and also it has become something different the post 9/11 era. HR is very different today than what it used to be before 9/11, right? Today, HR is very tactical, very transactional, and the HR function has almost no accountability to the outcome. So think about it. We're dealing with one of the largest crises of our generation, which is unprecedented labor shortage. I will disagree. I don't believe we have a labor shortage. I think it's just that labor participation problem. You're just having hard time attracting the workers that you want to hire for your organization. I can guarantee you there's many organizations within Wall Street as well as Silicon Valley, they have no problem attracting people because their compensation is right, they have the robust working culture, they have amazing career path. People want to come and work for them and stay there. So that is happening. It's proven that it works. So this problem is not to everybody. It's happening to so again, I'm talking about more on the high income bracket. I'm not talking about retail like grocery stores or fast food chain. I'm talking about predominantly in IT, high paid jobs, right? Consulting, software developers, engineers, right? That's who I'm referring to. Okay. So when you're looking at this phenomenon, everybody's talking about we are in the midst of this great resignation. And I think we very carefully thought about this matter, and that's why we chose the title, or is it the greatest opportunity in disguise? The truth of the matter is, it really is the greatest opportunity in disguise, right? Because a lot of these organizations, they simply miss the mark. They, unfortunately, whether it's intentionally or inadvertently, I think took their workers for granted in the last 2-3 decades. With so many rounds, 5, 6, 7 rounds of outsourcing, and perhaps maybe several hundred reorg they have done. That means every reorg has adequate number of headcount reduction. And I think now you are faced with a workforce that lost their trust in organization. They don't trust most of them doesn't trust their employers. Most of them do not believe that consulting companies that are advising these organizations have their best interest. A lot of companies that are creating powerful PowerPoint presentation, whether it's consulting firms or your big corporations, and saying how much they value their employees. Our employees are the center of everything. We value our workforce. The reality is, in most states, they don't really mean it, right? Because in one hand, you give a speech, and next day, your middle managers are, emailing their workers and saying, "Get ready for the next round of layoff," right? So when you're living in this type of a state of perpetual anxiety, you simply cannot solve this problem. So one more thing before I forget. so employers are not completely innocent in this. So a lot of the companies during the COVID, for whatever reason, they probably thought that this is going to stay here forever, the lockdown, and we're going to work remote forever. It created a tremendous cost takeout opportunity, and especially if you're a service provider, systems integrator, right? What they have done is, of course, the short-sighted thinking, they saw a tremendous opportunity to capture immediate revenue, right? High increase their margin. The way they done that is they let go all their real estate, most of the real estate, especially in a high cost market in New York, London, Paris, you name it, right? California. So now that COVID is over, a lot of organizations are saying, hey, we're gonna start working in person, and we want all our contractors to show up, because a lot of these corporations are highly reliant on contract workers, right, by outsourcers. So when they're saying we need people to show up at work, guess what? Nobody's there to come to work. Very few, because of all the recruitment that was done in the last 3 years, it was based on you could be from anywhere. It doesn't matter. As long as you can work remote, we hire you. And you have hired, or they have hired thousands of people. And now these people are so used to, or they were promised they're going to work remote, and now they're being asked, can you come back to work? And they're basically saying, no, we're not coming back to work, because for the last 2.5 years, they have recognized the benefit. One, is highly productive. It has been a tremendous opportunity. Same way it benefited employers financially by getting rid of all these capital expenditure, like offices, office rents, utility expenses, maintenance, everything that comes with having a physical assets. It also benefited employees, right? They looked at it and saying, wow, this is great. I'm not spending 2-3 hours in commuting to go to work. I am far more productive. I could log into my computer. I can get a lot done. I get to spend more time with my family, right? In some cases, it gave them the flexibility of working for any employer they want, any place. They were no longer restricted, right? So I think there's a lot goes on to where we are today. So I think when a lot of these companies, a lot of these pundits are talking about this era of great resignation, and they're only discussing the most obvious statement, that is COVID, and somehow something happened. You cannot just have magically hundreds and thousands of workers disappear from the workforce unless all of them hit lottery, they no longer have to work, and somebody magically paid off all their mortgage. So this is an absurd statement to say we cannot find workers. That is completely untrue. Completely untrue. I do not believe that, right? And I think I have made my case.
Yeah, I want you to touch upon, I think when we were talking offline, you mentioned something called the Peter Principle. I think it's a very catchy phrase, and it kind of lays out the problem at a bigger spectrum. So what is a Peter Principle?
So I think I was referring to Peter Principle in the context of outsourcing, but I will first answer what is Peter Principle. Peter Principle is basically when someone gets promoted to the level of their incompetence. There's only a certain amount of promotion you could give somebody. So you may be a very effective engineer, one of the best there is, but management is not your skill set. But somehow there was a vacancy and somebody promoted you to be a manager. And if that is not your passion or your skill, what just happened? You got a big promotion, right? Big raise, a lot of people reporting to you. It served you well, but it doesn't serve anyone else that are underneath you, right? People that you're supposed to be leading, because that's not a skill that you're good at. You were a really good engineer, right? I'm just using as an example. So for our viewers, Sam is not an engineer. He's a financial whiz, right? But you get it, right? So that's Peter Principle. So Peter Principle existed forever, right? Every company, at some point in time, you stay long enough in an organization, eventually you're going to get promoted to a level that you're no longer capable of functioning or adding value. But that's evolutionary. It happens over time to every organization. But what outsourcing has done, it exacerbated this problem. So it's directly correlated to that, and that's what I was referring to. What outsourcing has done, anytime you announce to a corporation that there is a headcount reduction coming, the smartest people immediately starts looking for a job, and they're the most marketable people. They will leave. You could almost guarantee that your top 10% of the high performance crew is gone. They found job, they left. So now you're stuck with maybe the group of people that you're left with, they're not your best of the best. So what happens? You do outsourcing round 1, round 2, round 3, and you're reducing your top tier talent in every single one of those exercises. Eventually, you're left with a group of people that they are neither leaders nor the highest performer. But now you're left them because by design, they've been with the company for so long, they get promoted in a leadership role. They're neither serving the corporation their best interest, nor they're serving the best interest of the people they're managing, right? And that's what I mean. So you've got Peter Principle. I hope I answered what is Peter Principle and how this is directly correlated with outsourcing culture.
No, thank you. And so, again, the problem could be measured from multiple perspectives. So I want to touch upon the regulations and the laws that are governing employment in the United States as well as overseas. So where's the problem when it comes to regulations?
So the regulation, it's a twofold, right? In the United States, what we have, it's called at-will employment doctrine. And in European Union, what we have called Workers' Council. And it's both of them solves some problem, but creates a problem of its own. So in the United States, to support the free market economy, they created this at-will employment doctrine. What that means is employer could fire their employee for any reason or no reason at all, right? And so is for an employee. They could quit any employer for any reason or no reason at all, right? So which is great. At least in principle, it sounds great, right? But the bad news with that is because then you almost have no rights, even though there are pre-existing laws in the book. But however, at-will doctrine somehow able to circumvent all or most of the existing laws because it gave corporations so much power and it took away any power from the employees, right? So what happened? It created a significant bad taste in people's mouth because now they feel like they're replaceable for any reason or no reason whatsoever, right? So that's a big problem, right? And that creates a tremendous amount of anxiety, and of course, that's also one of the things that's contributing to this massive labor shortage, right? Or let me rephrase that. I would like to say it massive labor participation problem, right? And now flip that with European Union. They have Workers' Council. It's fantastic for people because I have a lot of colleagues, because I used to work for Deutsche Bank, and I had a lot of colleagues in Germany, and they were always happy. They were always happy because the one worry they never had was their job is going to be outsourced or replaced. Even if there was outsourcing because of the regulatory requirement, even the outsourcer will have to continue their employment. So you can't just fire people. It's not that easy in Europe. It's very difficult. It's a very difficult process. Also, you cannot force people to work after 40 hours, where in America people work 60, 70, 80 hours. It's almost our normal in our culture. And in European Union, that's not the case, right? You're protected in that sense. But it also has its own unintended consequences. In the United States, you can work, and if you're a top talent, you could absolutely command, big salary, big compensation for your contribution. Where European Union, it provides you with job security, but it caps your earning potential. So if your earning potential is capped, your motivation isn't there to innovate, to do more. Or I'm not suggesting that there is no innovation happening in Germany, but my point is, it's a limiting factor. It's a limiting factor because because there's no incentive there. Why should I work more? It's very similar to communist systems, right? When your next door neighbor is a doctor, makes a certain amount of money, and then and you're a construction worker, you make the same amount of money and you live in the same neighborhood, you have access to the same social services. What's your incentive to send your kids to 4-year college? You got to look at that 4-year as a waste of time, right? So it's a similar thing. I think inadvertently the Workers' Council model creates that type of incentive problem, right? So again, these also contributed, both of these have contributed to the labor participation problem. So you may ask, or someone may argue, wait, European Union, they have a job security. They had a job security. Over the last 10 years, over the last decade, that Workers' Council's protection have been diluted significantly, where employers have gotten smarter And what they have done is to skirt any accountability or responsibility or bad press, they move the employees under the outsourcers on their book. So, and part of those contract, it did not guarantee continuous employment. That means after 12 months or 18 months, all these outsourcers could replace those workers with low cost labor arbitrage, accessing labor from any low cost market. So that diluted the safety net the Europeans have enjoyed under Workers' Council. So you see, these two set of regulation, with the best of intention when it was drafted, somehow over the year it got either diluted or it had been exploited by some employers to the point that it impacted the trust of your employees, right? And now you're dealing with the consequences after 2-3 decades later. And like I said earlier, that COVID is not the problem. The COVID is the catalyst that exposed the problem that started several decades ago. And that's where we are today.
And then one thing I just want to make it clear is that we are not anti-outsourcing. I think what you are saying is that outsourcing should not be prioritized among your hiring in-house labor force, right?
Yeah, so I'm a firm believer. I think there's a tremendous business opportunity for outsourcing in the United States and Europe. I was one of the people that championed outsourcing for Deutsche Bank. It was the first generation outsourcing to IBM. And I saw the value in it because I saw tremendous value in repeat tasks. For example, help desk. I felt like this was so non-strategic. This is a repeat task. It's a non-value add for the business or even for the employee that was doing this. That we could have easily taken those workforce and leveraged them for other more strategic business purpose. So that made a lot of sense, and I felt like, wow. And it's like this. I took a very simplistic approach to this, and I said, a lot of our colleagues, they literally go and hire an outsourced secretary, a personal secretary. They'll just send a little note or a text message saying, "Can you take care of all these tasks that I don't have time for?" So these busy people, could focus their time on more strategic activities, right? Something that will give them a greater earning potential. It'll give them more free time so they could spend time with their loved ones, whatever, right? So I looked at outsourcing that way. And I still believe that I think there is a tremendous opportunity for organization to leverage outsourcing and have a competitive advantage. But it has to be looked at very carefully. You cannot look at a short-term cost takeout and completely ignore the long-term impact of your most valuable asset. Arguably, this is your employees. If you compromise the trust and the emotional safety of your workforce, no company in the long term can survive, right? And why do you think a lot of these corporations, their strategy have been completely disrupted by startups? Why do you think that happened? You've got a couple of guys setting up a company, whether in New York or Silicon Valley, and people quitting their job in big corporation and joining them. Why is that? Because they feel empowered. They feel like they're part of something. They feel like they're creating something. And when these startups become successful, they all become multimillionaire, right? So it's not just the money aspect of it. It's the job satisfaction. It comes from being part of something, being valued. And I think this is the most basic principle a lot of corporations have forgotten, right? That if you can't value your employees, eventually, it's just a matter of time, they will find elsewhere. They'll go someplace else, right? And so what you're seeing right now, so you've got corporate culture, you've got legacy org design, you've got regulatory constraints, and you've got the way the organization looked at employees and cost takeout, right? So all these things have contributed to where we are today.
Thank you I think you laid out the problem really well. But again, the purpose of our podcast is not to only point out the problem, but also provide the solution. So where's the opportunity? Because every problem provides an opportunity. So
yeah. Yeah. So the opportunity, I'm going to break it up two ways. Let me see if I could do it well. So I think it's going to be a short-term opportunity, which I think a lot of companies have the first mover's advantage. They could easily, I mean, upset many of their competitors with a short-term view at like how do you go and make your job offers much more attractive than your competitors. Naturally, there's a cost to this, right? So I look at it like, how about a loss leader strategy? Your job is to make sure that one of the biggest gap in the industry is high caliber talent. Companies that will be able to attract and retain high caliber talent at a shortest period of time, they will have unprecedented market movers opportunity, right? They'll be able to capture all these revenue, all these opportunity that's out there, and that's waiting for this labor shortage to be addressed. So any company that's going to do that for the next 6, 12, 18 months, they will be able to capture an unprecedented amount of revenue. And not only that, they'll be able to capture that, they'll be able to cut in to their competitors' book of business because now they're struggling to find labor. They can't find work, and they're doubling down on their old ways of working. They're still saying, we're not going to increase our, employee salary or compensation because that'll impact our margin. That's a short-sighted thinking. You could continue to worry about your margin to the point your company's worth nothing. Or you could have a strategy where you have a loss leader strategy. You're making a short-term investment to attract and retain these talents, and your business is going to grow at a proportion, at a volume. You're going to make your money on volume, right? So a $10 billion company could become 15, 16, $20 billion company. So if your goal was a 30% margin, great. You may not be able to capture 30, but you may be able to capture 15% on a $20 billion company, right? So you have to really look at it. You have to weigh the risk versus reward. So in the short term, I think that could be a tremendous, and a lot of corporations are already doing this. Some of the big corporations, the big techs, they already changed their hiring practice, their compensation plan, all of that. The big techs have and the startups already have an advantage because their working culture is celebrated. It's sought after, right? In a long term, I'm going to break it up in two categories. I'm going to break up a solution for systems integrators, consulting firms, because their core business is labor arbitrage. They don't make widgets. They sell people, right? They make profit of low-cost workers, right? And then they sell them at a higher price. So I'm going to categorize that's a one group of business. And second is going to be corporations that are relying on a hybrid outsourcing and some portion of their organization with full-time employees, right? So let's address the consulting firms and the systems integrators. I think any organization today, whether it's an Accenture, IBM, TCS, whoever, right, that will introduce a robust compensation package that is highly competitive, with sign-in bonus and all that stuff, right? I think they will be able to not only capture attract tremendous amount of high caliber talent really fast, absorb it from the market. So even the others that's going to try to copy the same strategy, it's not going to work because the best of the best talents will already be taken out from the market, right? So that's what I meant. It's a small window of opportunity, and there's a first mover's advantage. So anybody that's going to make the move, but it has to be executed timely. It has to be done fast, and it all depends on the risk tolerance of these organizations, how much they're willing to, make an investment for a long-term gain, right? So I think that's a tremendous opportunity for the outsourcers, right? But again, it's still going to be short-lived if you still don't address some of the other fundamental issues I have outlined previously, right? For corporations, I think it's the same thing, right? In a corporation, it's not just a matter of giving a higher comps and better, bonuses or stock options. They have to make some changes. And their strategy has to be crystal clear. They have to embrace new ways of working. What does that new ways of working means? Where you're hiring people, talented, high caliber people that you trust, you empower. You trust them, they're going to do the right thing for the company, right thing for your customer. You have to empower them so they can go do the job they were hired to do. That's that, right? And how do you do that? So I think I talked about it in some length with you in the past. One of the things that I'm a big fan of is I think those days are gone where you have, 1,000 employee, a 10,000 employee, and you're getting in a competitive price, and they're all generalists, right? Because you're looking at more like a factory model. You've got X number of people, they're going to produce X number of lines of code per hour or per week or per month, right? That's the wrong way of looking at it. So one of the org design that I have embraced and I'm a huge fan of, it's a combination of Steve Jobs and Navy SEALs, right? Steve Jobs was a big fan of having. So let me give you a little bit more context. Steve Jobs initially went ahead and hired a lot of senior executives and mid-level executives from big corporations, and the understanding was we're getting the best of the best talents from big corporations. They're going to come in with their biggest, brightest idea, and they will do a lot of good stuff for Apple. It turned out it didn't work out that way, because a lot of these executives that were coming over, they were mostly delegators. There were very few SMEs. There were very few specialists. There was a lot of generalists. So one of the things he ended up making changes, and then he started forming this small group of specialist teams. And his philosophy behind that was that small group of A players will run circle around B, C, or D players any day, right? And I'm a firm believer. I have implemented this plan, and I have seen results firsthand. I've had a team of 7, 8 people working on engagements, rescuing engagements of team of a 50, 60, or even 100 people on the other end, right? That's a 10 to 1, 20 to 1, 30 to 1 ratio. So I'm a firm believer of that. And why did I use the word Navy SEALs? Because Navy SEALs is basically, if you look at it, what Steve Jobs was talking about. It represents or it mimics the model Navy SEALs have adopted, right? They're a sea, air, and land specialist. The key operating word is specialist. These guys are excellent, whether it's an air combat, whether they're on a land combat, hand-to-hand combat, or on the sea, right? They have to be not good, not great, but a specialist, the best of the best. So the United States Armed Forces could not afford to have everybody to be a SEAL Team 6. It's just not possible because the investment it requires, right, to maintain such a massive workforce of that caliber. It's not financially feasible, but strategically essential. So SEAL Team 6, they're directed to some of the most complex tasks in the most dangerous places in the world, right? And in the last decades, almost every job I've had, I always built a group of specialist teams surrounded by generalists. The model I used was, I call it 20-40-40 model. My 20% was always comprised of this is the best of the best. These guys are the leaders. They're the one who's going to grow your footprint. They're the guys and girls that's going to earn the trust of your customer and create additional opportunities, right? The next 40%, these were my generalists. These are my supporting engineers, right? Supporting SMEs, Scrum Masters, product owners. Their job is going to be delivering excellent work under the leadership of these specialists, which is the first 20% bucket. And the last 40% is basically what I called it a scaling bucket, meaning this is where you hire rapid scaling up, scaling down, and this is where I see a tremendous value you leverage from your outsourcing partners, right? You could leverage them to augment or complement in a seasonal peak, labor shortage, or any unique skill set that you don't want to hire for a long term, right? You need something for a short period of time. That's a one-off hiring, right? So I think with this type of model, this type of mindset, right, it's the reason why this is successful, because the people that are coming to work for your organization, they also have something to look forward to. Nobody wants to do the same boring thing every single day. You need a group of people, leaders that you could look up to and you want to emulate and you want to grow as a person, as a professional. And this model allows that opportunity because now everybody around this first 20% specialist group, they all want to be part of this group. They all want to have an opportunity. They have something to look forward to. They have somebody to learn from. So this is truly a powerful organizational transformation model, right? So having said that, how do you then make it work? This is not going to work if you're not able to identify the best of the best talents. So when you look for these best of the best talents, are you looking for just top performers? And this is the problem, right? Here is the problem because a lot of HR and procurement today, they focus on high performance. High performance is the mantra. If you look at the HR, when they do annual appraisal, they have hundreds of KPIs just focused around performance, performance, performance. But there's very few. So one of the things that I talk about when I say Navy SEALs, they have two KPIs. It's performance and trust. There's a small specialist group, and they're as strong as their weakest link. They can't afford to have untrustworthy leaders, untrustworthy soldiers. It's the same thing with this type of an org structure and a new corporate model, right? Because these are small specialist group, these are the people that have to be people of high integrity, high trust, because I would pick any day of the week a medium performance, high trust individual over a high performance, low trust leader or a coworker because they don't have your back. They don't have the company's best interest. They don't have your best interest. They're very, very much self-serving. And that's a toxic leader and a toxic coworker. So this is where I think HR, this is what I mean by why HR is so outdated. This is one of the most legacy organization. Their ways of thinking is today they have become a glorified body shop. Just-in-time body shop, they are basically the coordinator. In most cases, please don't get me wrong, there are companies I've seen have world-class HR leaders, really phenomenal HR, right? But in many organizations are struggling. And when I talk about the Peter principle, right, this is how it happens because everybody's focused on performance and there's no KPI to measure trustworthiness of an individual.
I think we also talked about how to transform traditional HR into CESRO. Can you elaborate on that? I think that was a very good point. You brought it up offline. So
Yeah. How are we doing with time?
I think we have a few minutes.
Okay. So today, if you look at head of HR, the title they have is called CHRO. CHRO, Chief Human Resources Officer. There lies the problem. This is legacy. They have only one role. They just manage a whole bunch of human resources. And over the years, and with the outsourcing culture, they simply became a very much of an order-taking organization. It's a back office organization, legacy. They're not focused. I mean, of course, nobody ever says that. They're not looking out the best interest of the employee. And if you're not looking out for the best interest of your employee, you're not looking out the best interest of your organization. Organizations that are successful are the ones that have employees that are empowered, they're happy, they're giving their all, right? So HR definitely is not doing that. And there's no accountability today. HR today, you have to ask yourself, I read so many articles, and you and I talked about this on this topic, right? At the Great Resignation. I hardly saw anywhere anyone talked about HR as a root cause of this problem or one of the root cause. No one picked up on that. It's like, how can you talk about people and the human resources, the people that are the group that is in charge for managing your people is not even mentioned, right? Because I don't know why. I really don't have an answer. But the truth of the matter is they are accountable. And this is what I mean. The old CHRO organization have no accountability. For them, corporations came to their CHRO or their HR business partner and said, I need X number of bodies. Go source it for me. They go to procurement. They have a pre-negotiated rate card. They go source it. They go, here's your bodies. It's done. There is no commitment. There's no accountability. If those people, 100 people, 1,000 people, they worked on a project, they missed their deadline, they did not deliver the product on time, doesn't matter because it's labor arbitrage. They're not accountable for outcome. So this old school contract, the way you used to have for a transformation program, we would sign a statement of work with a fixed fee engagement with the consulting firms. The consulting firm is on the hook to deliver the outcome for that money, right? During that time, within that time period. Today's sourcing model took away that protection companies used to have. So companies are actually spending a lot more money. And let me just give you that, maybe times 10. So if they saved, say, 30, 40, or 50% on a labor arbitrage, in a longer term, they are losing 10, 20, 50, 100 times more in loss of productivity, loss of accountability, loss of innovation. Because when you do labor arbitrage, they're not on the hook for innovation. They're not in the hook to the business outcome. They're coming in, you ask for a skill, and you ask for a duration. Say, I need a front-end developer for 12 months. You give them task every day. There is a backlog they follow. Whatever gets done, gets done. They're not on the hook for quality. And if it doesn't get done, what happens? Contract get extended. Companies are paying twice, 3 times, 4 times the amount. And the problem is by the time you get the work done, market has moved on. The product you created is no longer viable because strategy doesn't wait for companies to, whenever they decide on their time to deliver something, right? That's the thing about, corporate strategy. So coming back to that, HR is a huge problem. So you cannot solve this big problem if you don't look at it. So that's CHRO. That's a traditional problem. You ask for CESRO, right? Mm-hmm. So the way I looked at it is my view has been is most organizations have made a conscious decision to transform every part of the company. HR and procurement hasn't. So if you're going to look at today, like if you look at sales, they no longer hire VP of sales, right? Head of sales. They're hiring what? Chief Growth Officer. There is an absolute accountability in their title. It says you're accountable for the growth of the company. That means it's long-term view, right? Same thing with HR has to happen. CESRO is Chief Employee Satisfaction and Retention Officer. So right off the bat, you have 2 accountability called out in their title. So you have to make sure your employees that you're bringing into the door, they're going to be satisfied working here. They're going to love working for this company, and they will remain here. That you could retain them. So they have a satisfaction accountability and they have a retention accountability. Those 2 are attributed to the long-term corporate growth, right? So I think this is a long overdue. This has to happen, and that's going to detoxify a lot of this toxic organizational culture.
So now the responsibility is mutual. They are not only organizations aren't only expecting performance from the employees, but also they are accountable to the employees by having them a satisfactory KPIs.
Yeah, satisfactory KPI, but it's also a truly, a paradigm shift because HR today, I mean, it's like almost like an internal police organization. It's like internal affairs. If you talk to an employee at anytime there's an HR shows up on the call, it's like people are fearful. It's like, my God, what are they gonna? Because HR doesn't bring any good news. Usually, when they show up and you need something done from HR, you're never gonna find them. I mean, in most companies, only time HR is most visible when somebody's about to get laid off, right? So having said that, I think that has to happen. And CESRO is definitely going to create that type of accountability. It will detoxify the corporate culture. And I think at the same token, if you look at procurement organization, I think procurement organization have to be broken up in 2 areas. Anything that is business as usual or BAU, it has to be fully automated, transparent, that does not require any manual intervention, because it just introduces bureaucracy. It adds no value. Anything that is transformation type of engagements, that in that case they must have accountability that is KPI identical to the sense and sales and delivery organization. So that way they also have accountability to the success of the organization and the outcome, and not just a short-term view of, look how much money I saved this quarter by squeezing my vendor, right? You don't squeeze your vendor. Trust me on this. I was the vendor. I was on both sides. I was the buyer and I was also service provider. When you squeeze the vendor to give such a small, get a deep discount, guess what happens? They're not going to give you their A caliber talent. They're going to give you B, C, or a D talent. So you're not winning. All you're doing is you just creating a bad problem worse. So hopefully I covered some of the solution, right?
I think we provided this a roadmap for how to capitalize on this opportunity, either your organization or fund manager, when you're investing in the company. So I want to say thank you for the great conversation. Any closing thoughts?
Well, look, I'm excited, right? I think every opportunity brings an amazing, every crisis brings an amazing opportunity, and I think this labor shortage or lack of labor participation have created a tremendous once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And like I said before, that any company that's going to be sincerely thinking about reversing the trend, they have the first mover's advantage. It's just a matter of time how fast they want to jump in and take advantage of it.
Oh, before I forget, I know you wanted to provide some plugs, and why don't you do that, and we'll have our closing remarks.
Alrighty, so I want to end this call today with gratefulness, right? First and foremost, to our viewers and listeners, thank you very much. We really appreciate you listening and providing feedbacks, and I hope you continue to do that. I also want to mention somebody. This is something very just sudden. So I went to this coffee shop the other day, and I ordered some coffee and breakfast, and I was waiting for you. And all of a sudden, I realized when the bill came, I had no money. I lost my wallet and I had no cash. So the waiter, Jordan McCormick from Huddle, New Jersey, and he looks at me with no hesitation and he says, "John, don't worry about it. I got this. I know you're good for it. You can take care of it." He doesn't know me, by the way. He saw me once before, months ago, with you. That was for maybe a few minutes. He does not know me. I'm not from the neighborhood. But this generosity, this kindness, it was really something. So I just want to tell our listeners and viewers, if you're from the neighborhood, if you're from New Jersey, if you go to this place called the Huddle House and you run into Jordan McCormick, say hi. He's a great fella, and I'm sure you're going to be pleased with his service.
Thank you, John. And I also want to say thank you to our viewers and listeners. And John and I, we are trying hard to bring you a great content. So please, if you like this podcast, subscribe, like, and share with your friends. And, you can reach out to us and let us know what you want to hear in the future. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone.